All right, so today we're diving deep into the career of Gene Hackman, a true Hollywood legend. And I know you're interested to find out why Hackman's performances just completely draw you in. And well, honestly, so am I. And the more you dig into his journey, the more fascinating it gets. For starters, he didn't even consider acting as a career until after serving in the Marines.
That's right. And even then, even after he decided on acting, can you imagine being 24 years old and being told that you're too old for drama school? I mean, that's exactly what happened to Hackman. But this rejection, obviously, it didn't stop him. And I think that makes his eventual success all the more impressive.
It really does make you wonder where that drive came from,
Okay.
what kept him going. It seems like even from his early years, there was this relentless pursuit of authenticity. Not just in the roles he chose, but just, in his life in general. And during those early years, trying to make it in New York, he actually shared an apartment with another aspiring actor at the time, Robert Duvall.
Oh, wow. Talk about a room full of talent. It's amazing to think about those two, future icons honing their craft, working on their dreams together. But going back to Hackman, his path to success, it definitely wasn't a straight line. He was born in 1930 in San Bernardino, California, and, faced his fair share of struggles, setbacks, the whole 9 yards.
And it's in those struggles that you start to see his unique acting style emerge, I think. He wasn't afraid to embrace the raw elements of human experience, even the uncomfortable ones, and I think that became a hallmark of his most powerful performances.
Right, and you almost wonder if those early life experiences, the challenges that he went through, it feels like they fed directly into this ability to portray characters with such depth and honesty. And by the 1960s, he starts to get some real recognition. He lands a role in Lilith, which was a really important stepping stone, and then comes the big breakthrough, an Oscar nomination for Bonnie and Clyde.
I'm curious about that breakthrough moment. Was it just the recognition that came with the nomination, or was there something specific about his performance in Bonnie and Clyde that really set him apart?
It's a great question, and I think it was a bit of both. The nomination itself obviously put him on the map in a big way, but his portrayal of Buck Barrow, it showed this captivating blend of intensity and vulnerability, and I think it gave audiences just a glimpse of, what he was truly capable of bringing to a role.
Yeah, and that complexity really shines through when you look at the variety of characters that he played throughout his entire career. I mean, you go from the relentless, almost obsessive Detective Popeye Doyle in The French Connection to the hilariously evil Lex Luthor in Superman.
All right.
It's incredible.
It really is. And it's not just about, heroes and villains. It's that he could inhabit any role with this just startling authenticity. Francis Ford Coppola, who directed him in The Conversation, he described Hackman as having this unerring instinct for truth when he was performing.
That's quite a statement. It almost implies that he wasn't acting, but he was channeling some deeper understanding of human nature. Like he wasn't trying to play the character, but he was revealing the truth within that character.
Exactly. And that's what made his performances so compelling. He wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. He wasn't afraid to show flaws, the complexities of these characters. And Dustin Hoffman, who was his co-star in Marathon Man, he marveled at Hackman's ability to just disappear into his roles. He said that he would sometimes forget that he was acting with him.
Wow, to have that kind of impact on a fellow actor, especially one as talented as Dustin Hoffman, I mean, that says a lot. But you mentioned earlier that, for a lot of people, his role as Sheriff Little Bill Daggett in Unforgiven is seen as maybe his most powerful performance, the one that earned him his second Oscar.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, Little Bill, he is a ruthless character, but Hackman somehow gives him this depth that makes him both terrifying and tragically human.
Yeah.
It's almost a masterclass in how an actor can make even the most morally ambiguous character resonate with the audience.
That's an interesting point. It's not just about playing good or bad. It's about finding the truth within each character, even the most flawed ones. And to do that with a character like Little Bill, to make him someone we can at least understand even if we don't like him, that's truly remarkable.
It really is, and it speaks to this level of skill and nuance that kind of elevates him beyond just a great actor. It's like he's tapping into something universal, some shared human experience that goes beyond the specific role that he's playing.
So we're seeing this thread of authenticity throughout his whole career, this real dedication to uncovering that truth within each character. But I wonder how that translates to his personal life. He was notoriously private, almost reclusive. And I wonder if that was a deliberate choice, a way to maintain that integrity outside of the Hollywood world.
That's a good point, and it's something we'll definitely explore further when we get to, the later stages of his career. And his eventual retirement.
All right, so we've established that Hackman was far from your typical Hollywood star. A late bloomer faced rejection, and yet he persevered and brought this unparalleled level of authenticity to his craft. Now, I'm really interested to see how this dedication to truth played out in some of his most acclaimed performances.
Well, let's dive into one of those performances then. His work in The Conversation is a prime example, a film that I think reveals a lot about his approach to acting and his ability to just explore these really complex layers of the human psyche.
Perfect, because that's exactly where I wanted to go next.
Yeah.
Okay, so The Conversation, it does seem like the perfect place to go next after everything we've been talking about. Hackman's commitment to authenticity and that emotional depth he brings to his roles. What is it about this film in particular and his performance that makes it, such a standout moment in his career?
Well, in The Conversation, Hackman plays Harry Call. He's this surveillance expert who gets more and more paranoid as he uncovers this potential conspiracy. But the really interesting thing about the film is it's not so much about the plot itself. It's more about Harry's own internal struggles, his psychological unraveling.
Yeah, the film has this incredibly claustrophobic feeling to it, almost suffocating at times.
Yeah.
And it really mirrors Harry's state of mind.
Exactly. And Hackman's performance is so key to creating that atmosphere. It's a really internalized performance. You see it in his eyes, the way he carries himself, the subtle shifts in his expressions. It's as if he's carrying this enormous weight on his shoulders, and the audience feels it too.
I remember being struck by how quiet he is in the film. It's not a role that relies on those big dramatic outbursts. But it's these small, almost imperceptible moments of, realization and despair. It's so different from some of his other big roles.
It is, and yet it shows another side of his versatility. He's not just about intensity. He can do subtlety nuance, conveying a whole range of emotion with minimal dialogue. Think about the scene where Harry's listening back to the recordings, piecing together the conversation that he thinks reveals a murder plot. The tension is palpable. And it's all conveyed through Hackman's expressions and the way he's interacting with the technology.
Yeah, it's really where the technical aspects of the film work so well to enhance his performance. The sound design, the close-ups on his face, it all comes together to create this feeling of unease and isolation.
Definitely. It's a testament to Hackman's acting, for sure, and also Francis Ford Coppola's direction. They work together perfectly to pull the audience into Harry Call's world, which is fascinating but also really disturbing.
This makes me think about his ability to play those morally ambiguous characters so convincingly. We talked about Little Bill in Unforgiven, but Harry Call is another great example. He's not a classic villain, but he's not exactly a hero either.
Yeah, right. And that's what makes those performances so compelling. They force us to confront those gray areas of morality, to try to understand characters who don't always act in ways that we agree with. And I think that's where Hackman's dedication to truth really comes through. He's not afraid to play characters who are flawed, who mess up, who might even repulse us at times.
It's interesting because it seems to contradict the public persona he cultivated. This very private person, this man who avoids interviews and the spotlight. And yet he's able to lay bare these complex, often troubled characters on screen. It's kind of a paradox.
It is a fascinating paradox, and it makes you think about the nature of acting itself. Maybe that distance from the public eye allowed him to explore those darker, more vulnerable parts of human experience without the fear of judgment or exposure.
That's an interesting thought. Maybe he needed that separation, that privacy, to really tap into those raw emotions. That's what made his performances so believable. But speaking of contrast, we can't forget about his comedic side. Royal Tenenbaum and the Royal Tenenbaums is a perfect example. Hilarious and heartbreaking at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. Another great example of his range. We see that same commitment to truth, but this time it's expressed through this, this whimsical sadness.
And it's not just silly humor either. It's sharp, witty, and often rooted in Royal's own insecurities. He's a character who just desperately wants to be loved, but doesn't know how to go about getting it.
It's such a nuanced performance, and it's interesting to think about how it's influenced other actors. Bryan Cranston, who's also brilliant at blending drama and comedy, has often cited Hackman as a major inspiration.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. They both have this incredible ability to make you laugh one minute and then break your heart the next. And it all stems from that same commitment to honesty, to finding the humanity in each character, no matter how eccentric they might be.
Exactly. They're not afraid to show us the full spectrum of human experience. And that's what makes their performances so powerful.
So we've covered his dramatic range, his comedic timing, his ability to play both heroes and villains. But there's one part of his career we haven't really discussed yet, and that's his decision to retire back in 2004. After such a long and successful career, What made him decide to step away from acting?
Well, Hackman himself has always been pretty tight-lipped about his reasons for retiring. He's said that he just didn't want to do it anymore, which is understandable after such a demanding career.
Yeah, I get that, but I still can't help but feel like there's more to it than that. Maybe it goes back to his need for authenticity, you know, for a life lived on his own terms. Perhaps the whole Hollywood machine with all its demands and expectations just became too much.
That's definitely possible. He's always been fiercely independent. And maybe he reached a point where he needed to prioritize his own well-being and pursue some other passions. He's a big sailing enthusiast, and he's also written several novels.
That does make him sound like someone looking for fulfillment outside those traditional measures of success.